is Adam Perry with TrueDFS, and I am going to do a short video going through tonight's 3-game NHL slate. We continue to be in that kind of unfortunate pattern with the NHL scheduling where we get like 14 games in one night and then one game another night, 2 games, 3 games. So we have a pretty small slate, but I think there's a lot to talk about. It's not a slate that news is going to affect. There's, as far as I know, there aren't any game time decisions we have to look out for, things like that. But what we do have is some changes to the SaberSim model that I think are going to really change how we approach the slate. They may not change things at all, but we want to find out. So I haven't looked much at how my lineups come out using SaberSim's new model, but I think that's what I'm going to do today. And we'll just kind of experiment and play around with SaberSim and see how it goes. I've got to make the transition to using the new SaberSim look, because they're getting rid of the old look and the option to use the old one in a few days. So I got to get used to the new one. All good things come to an end, I guess. The new one I'm sure is great, but I'm a creature of habit. So before we go forward, be sure to like and subscribe if you want to get more content like this. TrueDFS is always putting out videos. Kenny and Bobby just did over an hour on PGA. We've got an hour on the NBA slate that is going to be absolutely crazy tonight with the trade deadline. So there's a lot of things to look out for, and consider becoming a TrueDFS member. If you take a look at how we use SaberSim, how I'm going to do it in this video, there's a lot of great packages where you could get SaberSim for almost the same price, plus the projections that we have through Goldie and Sheets and all the content in Discord and premium content that these guys are doing. So be sure to check that out and give us a like and subscribe if you want to learn more every day. So anyway, let's get into it. I'm going to build first just using what SaberSim has right now. And normally what I like to do in my small field contests is only play the 5-man stacks and the 6-man stacks. I am committed to my theory that you don't need to get that many things right in a 100-man contest. Today I'm playing in the 222, which is what I normally play in, and it's like a 67-man field, right? So, I don't know. I'd like to pick one team as my main stack and try and get that right to try and win, as opposed to playing a 3-3-2 and having to get three guesses right, or a 4-3-1 where I've got to get the one off right. I always think I could bring more along if it's the right price by playing the oversized stack things, and I don't have to come close to hitting the nuts or having an outlier performance to win this kind of contest. So I'd like to capture as much of the best results that I can on a team in their 2, 3, 4 goals, as opposed to trying to hit the 3 guys or the 4 guys on 2 different teams that get those points. So that's been my theory. Now you said, well, why is there a but? Well, SaberSim's model also tended to prefer those because SaberSim puts a lot of weight into the power play correlations. And of course, there's 5 guys on the power play. So I would tend to be pretty happy just stacking the power play and maybe attaching a one-off to it. Now, SaberSim has changed their models with some findings that they've had and others have had in the community, that even strength scoring was under accounted for in their projections and in their correlation matrices. So we're going to see, if we build now, how that plays out. If you take someone, like if we look at one of the player cards, just click Pasternak is a good example. Let's see what comes up with the correlations between him and the other skaters. So he's on line 1 with Zacha, and that's going to be his strongest correlation. His second strongest then is a guy on line 2, Marchand, but who's also on the power play with him. So it's still giving a lot of weight to the power play. But what we're seeing now is, like, you get this Morgan Geekie, who is not on the power play with Pasternak. He's on power play 2, still having a pretty strong correlation coefficient with Pasternak. And that says something, right? That says that you could almost get as much correlation in the even strength as you could with the power play. Geeky is pretty close to Marchand. So we're going to see how that affects lineups. It's going to be price dependent, of course. Geeky isn't cheap. He's not expensive, but he's kind of a mid-tier guy. So that's gonna matter and it's gonna matter even more when it gets pricey to do things. So like I was playing around with Zach Hyman before this, and if you look at Zach Hyman, his strongest correlation now is with RNH, but then it's with Arvidsson, who's not on the power play. So Hyman is going to have less correlation with McDavid, with Bouchard, with Draisaitl than he is with his guys that are on line 2 with him, or at least one of them. So, that's definitely something to think about, especially if we're going to be doing hand building. We're going to let SaberSim do it for us. So let's see what it comes up with. And the thing that'll be real interesting is we'll build here without changing our exposures. So normally what I would do is I'd make 2 changes and I would say, give me only 5 stacks and 6 stacks. But let's see what happens now if we simulate our contest with all those other ones and see what percentage of the onslaughts we get. If we did that in the past, we would still usually get 60, 70, 75% of the onslaught stacks in the contest sims. And that made me confident saying, okay, given what we know, given what SaberSim builds and what it thinks is best for this contest, why don't we just build the onslaughts? Because that's what we're going to play anyway. But that might change. So let's add simulation here. Run these lineups and then build. And bear with me a little. I'm not used to using the new SaberSim as much. Let's run the sims on the 222 contest with the projected field. Let's see. See, why can't I see my lineups? If I change the view, will I? Nope, it doesn't seem to want to show me lineups. So maybe we're going to be forced to switch things up. Can't see anything. It's frustrating. All right, well, let's see what happens. I don't seem to have any filters on. Let's see what happens if this, no. All right, let's see what happens if I switch to the old SaberSim. Bear with me. All right. Okay. Now I could see our top lineups. Let's just go by ROI. So our stack exposures in the top 10, we're getting 20% of the 5-mans and a lot more of the 4-2 and 4-3s, 4-2-2s than we're used to. So this is something to consider. Let's see what these ROIs look like. Our top one is a 5-man. One of the things we have to remember is we also have more of the 4-mans. And we've got 29%, another 6. We've got about 35% and only 16% of the 5s. If we forced in an equal amount, would it pick more? Our top lineup did come out to be a 5-man of Edmonton, not the whole power play. And the ROI is 73%. Let's see where our next 5-man comes out. This 4-2 stuff. I mean, playing the 4-man stuff gets you the Edmonton. I'm surprised that isn't really chalky, but maybe, it can eat some chalk given the size of the contest. So right now we're not going down too much in ROI between any of these. Here's another 5-man. It's just about the same ROI of the Edmonton. Do we have any? No, I mean, it wants to jam that Edmonton right now. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, the ownerships are not too high given the cost. Let's see what the high stakes ownership. We should have built using this. Yeah, I mean, about 30%, but we're playing in a small field, so it makes some sense. Let's see if we go to 20 lineups, how far down we'd go in ROI. Not too much. About 14. Let's see, is that 16%? You get a lot more of the 4s than the 5s. So that's interesting and noteworthy. So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Like right now, if we look at our stack exposure, our pool is predominantly filled with the 3s, the 4 stuff. So we've got a little more 4-2s than the 5-2s, way more 4-3s, way more 4-2s. So it's just got a lot more options to choose from. So the question is, are we getting more 4 stacks because there's just more good 4 stacks built in our pool? Or are we getting more 4 stacks because they're just better given the new model and it's changing things that the even strengths are stronger? So I'm going to change things up a bit. I'm going to rebuild here. Okay. So let's go to our stack exposure and let's see what happens. I mean, we're not going to play these 2-mans. We're not going to worry about the 3-mans. We got absolutely none of them. So now, let's see what happens if we force in, if we limit, let's limit these. How would we do it? Let's see. So we want at least, let's tell it at least 10% of this expands. We were at 13% on the 5-2s. Let's get some more of that. So we're at 25%. Let's sell it at least 10% of the 5. So now we're going to have some more representation. Let's see if that then reflects in how many we get. I mean, maybe there just weren't enough for it to choose from, especially the Edmonton, which it liked. Now, this may constrain the builder. So we'll see if we get to 5,000 lineups. Let's do something I forgot to do last time, is use it, build these lineups with the high stakes ownership, and then let's see what happens. If we look at like Sheets' stuff, you got the 2 Edmontons at top 2, and then now you got Draisaitl and McDavid on the same line, which is pretty exciting. The top 2 players on the slate probably on the same line together. They make it tough to build, but look at all this Los Angeles showing up too. You can get a lot nicer pricing here, but the Edmonton and the Kings are really clumping in Sheets' stuff. It'd be interesting to see how they show up if we build that way. We'll do that after. So, all right, we've got 5,000 lineups now. Let's see how the stack exposures turned out. So now 47%. Now we're a little bit closer to 50-50 on the onslaughts. 20%, 35%, 42. Yeah, okay. So now with the 5-2s and the 6s and the 5, we got 20, 35%. Yeah. Okay, but we have more to choose from. So let's see what happens if we see our top simulated ROI lineups to see if the 5-mans do any better. So let's sort by ROI, not the saber score. I mean, interesting, right? So if we give it some options, the top ROI lineups, you're getting way less 4-3s. Now, there could be some variance in the sims themselves, but we're getting much higher ROI. I mean, this is 17% higher than our highest ROI lineup was in the last sim. So, to me, this says that you could still do pretty damn good with the onslaughts, and that the Sims still really likes them, at least in terms of tonight's slate and in terms of Edmonton. I mean, we'll check out how this goes on future slates. The other interesting thing is in the top 10, we get a different team. We get some Chicago, which we didn't before. We got like all Edmonton in the top 20. That's just about where we're going to get here, but not quite. But only 15% of the 4-mans. Are they both Edmonton? All 3 Edmonton? Yeah. But it goes to show you that you could do some things prior to building that could really change it. I think we'll see that when we throw in Sheets' projections and see how that builds different lineups that gets it to different ROIs. Let's just run another sim to see if we get some variance in how these results show up. So in our top 20 here, look at the onslaughts. Really likes these onslaughts. We're still at 15% of the 4-mans. So I don't know. If you build, where's our top ROI lineup? Our highest ROI is 84. We got to 72 in the previous build. I mean, that's saying to me, if you build more 5s, if you build more 6 stacks, they will grade out pretty high ROI. Now, the interesting thing about this is there's much more discrepancy between, actually, we're forcing it in. Okay. See, now that makes sense. When I saw it was going down to 41. So let's not force it. We still had our exposure mins. So now if we take the exposure minimums off, ended up about the same. And let's see where the ROI. So the ROI of the 20th lineup is 60%, which is about where we were, I think, in the out-of-the-box build without, building more onslaught stacks. But our highest ROI lineups right here is 84. We were in 90 before. So that says to me, if you could build more onslaughts, you could find some higher ROI stuff. I mean, let's see what happens if we take out the onslaughts, how high of an ROI we can get using 4-mans. So let's tell it to build only 4-man stacks. Let's see what our top 20 ROIs look like doing it this way. It's Edmonton thing. I mean, you certainly can't do the power play here, and I don't need to look. I know that before I look. I mean, if I put in Edmonton's power play guys, 3,200 a man left. Can you even do this? I put in a cheap goalie. Nope. Who's the cheapest goalie on the slate? Chicago. Well, we're not playing Chicago against our stack, and we're not going to get to these 6,500 guys. So 72 is the cheapest. You can't even play the Edmonton power play. So, that says something too. It says these 5-man and 6-mans are contingent on playing Edmonton a certain way that maybe the field isn't. And that's something we're going to have to think about going forward. We're finding out these results on tonight's slate, but we want to keep looking at least over the next week or two to see how this plays out on other slates with different options and the field doing different things. So now we built 5,000, only 4-mans. Let's see what the ROI looks like. 70% ROI is our top lineup. In the top 20, we get to about this, get to about the same place. 20th lineup is a 52. Let's just run another sim, see if there's any variance. If something pops up higher. 67%. So our highest lineup is even less. I mean, I don't know. That tells me that at least on tonight's slate, the onslaughts can get you up to a higher ROI in the sims if you're willing to play them. And maybe the reason people aren't getting them is that they're not building them as much. And if you build more of them, you may get some of those that keep getting those outlier performances. We had our top 5-man ROIs getting into the 90s. So something to think about. Now, I am going to go on a limb and say if we upload Sheets' stuff, that we're going to get really different lineups and some really interesting ROIs. But let's see. So let's take off all our requirements. And I'm just going to upload Sheets' projections. I'm not going to upload the ownership because Sheets' ownership is going to be optimized to get you the best ownership for the flagship, that $20, 2,000 person contest. But of course, we're not building for that right now. So let's just upload the projections and let's leave the ownership out. I'm going to continue to use what SaberSim thinks the high stakes ownership is going to be. But instead, I'm going to build using Sheets' projections. And of course, you get access to Sheets' projections and Goldie's projections, two different sets to build from with TrueDFS. And you can get that with the SaberSim package that is not much more than the ultimate at SaberSim itself. So you get a lot of added value. And you've got Sheets doing premium content behind the paywall. You've got the Discord behind the paywall where we're always chopping it up on strategy. So it is something to consider. I, of course, was a member as I learned DFS and long before I started doing content. And the reason I can do this kind of content is because of those things. So I highly recommend it. And of course, like and subscribe. Anyway, my pitch is over. We've got our lineups. Let's run a simulation. Let's see what the top 20 look like using Sheets' stuff. Sort by ROI. Running against the ownership that SaberSim thinks, we may perhaps end up coalescing right back onto that Edmonton, but no. So for one, a lot of variation. We're starting to get into these threes. We've got, as far as 4 men, 5, 2 is 7. So 7 4-man stacks. And we've got 4 3-man stacks. Nope, 5. So 12. But then you get 25% of the 6-mans. And We're getting 1 of the 5 twos, 2 of the 5s, 3, 6. So say it's a pretty big percentage of onslaughts again. Let's see what our top ROIs look like. Getting to totally different teams, which is pretty cool. You got Rangers, Chicago, a little bit of Edmonton, 4 stacks. Makes sense with the Edmonton pricing. So look at just how much a different set of projections can change how things get simulated. Now, the ROIs of this 6-man is about 80. So pretty close in ROI. Let's see how clumped in ROI they are. Yeah, just a 15% difference, right? And there's going to be variance in the sims. So let's just demonstrate that by running another sim. So, why is there variance in the sims? Well, you run a simulation 10,000 times and you look for the lineups that did the best. And how do you do the best? Well, you do the best by winning a GPP. But even in a small GPP, a good lineup just may not win it that often. So you get that kind of variance. And then the other reason there's variance is we're playing a 67-man contest. So SaberSim's got to run, your lineups against what it thinks the field's going to be. And it has this large set of high-stakes field lineups. Well, your field is not that big, so it's going to take a sample of them in each time. And so there's variance in how it samples the lineups from its high-stakes bucket. So something to remember, that just because you run the sims once does not mean you'll get the same results the next time. So here we got a lot less of the 6-mans and still about the same on the 4s and the 3s, but way less of the onslaughts here. The ROI came out about the same, and the teams are about the same. New sheets of stuff as they are right now. Get to the Rangers. 3.7 total. I mean, they're a half point behind Edmonton and SaberSim's average totals. That's not bad. That's not bad. And I imagine the ownership's less. I mean, who doesn't like playing Edmonton against Chicago? Let's see. Let's take a look if we did the same thing. We got rid of all this small stuff, and we had a much more even representation between the 4-mans and the onslaughts, how the top ROIs would look. This caused a huge change. We got to way more onslaughts at higher EV, at a higher expected ROI, with some outliers perhaps in our pool. So let's see what happens now. And let's demand that it make, again, like 30% onslaughts. I'm going to give it something I think it can do. And this might constrain the builder a bit. Now let's rebuild. And we will see. No, I think there's, sorry for the chat here. Joining late, Adam. I'm not sure if you touched on large field GPP in the 20 minutes. Yeah, Deep Pope. Thanks, Deep Pope. So the question about game stacking, I don't have a problem whatsoever with the game stacking. I'm not quite, I mean, just thinking from an intuitive level, when teams get up 4-0, 5-0, their best plays tend to get less minutes in hockey. And so getting some goals against your team is not necessarily a bad thing in keeping the game close enough. The other thing is if the game's close enough, you tend to get some empty net. And with the empty net, if your guys are on ice, is a good chance at another point or two. So I'm not against game stacking at all. People ask about this all the time. I can't think of the intuitive reasons why there would be a problem with it. If somebody does have a problem with it, like, or has those reasons, let me know. But I am not at all opposed to game stacking. And I got to say, I mean, I would think off the top of my head, it is better for outlier performances. And, Deep Hope, you're asking about the 20 max stuff. Well, I think that it's like a lot better, and you're going to need more outlier performances in the 20 max stuff. So I don't have any problem with the game stacking. Like you said, we saw it come up. I said go for it. The other thing, I mean, you certainly don't have to worry about it, I think, on a three-game slate, or if it's a smaller slate like we get on these Wednesdays and Fridays where it's 2 games. I mean, I wouldn't worry about it much at all, as long as you're not stacking against your goalie. Now, the other question is just the general question about covering the 20 max stuff or the large field stuff. Let's just run that and see what happens. But first, let's see. So let's see what our exposures look like. Now, we've got 26%. So now we've got about 36% of the onslaughts. Let's run a sim and see what the ROIs look like in the small field stuff. See our top 20 lineups. Still using Sheets' stuff, we're going to get we're going to get a lot more of the 4-mans. And our ROI went down a lot. So it's interesting. If you use SaberSim stuff, oh, never mind. Because like a fish, I did not sort by ROI. Okay. Let's sort it by ROI and see what changes. Top 10. So top 10, it's 6-4, so about 40% onslaughts. Okay, so this is good. So if we have a pool with greater representation of onslaughts, using SaberSim's projections, we ended up getting way more onslaughts than 4-mans. And we got higher ROIs of those onslaughts. Now, if we use Sheets's, we got a lot of 4-mans to start. And if we even it out like that, we get 5, 8, 11. It's about 50-50 in our top 20 lineups. The top ROI is an onslaught 6-man with 78% ROI. So the highest ROI is a little higher. And then we've got 61%. I think we were going down to the 50s with our 20th lineup using the SaberSim stuff. And no, actually, we were using Sheets of stuff and going down in the 50s. And I think we were getting up to like the 70s, 60s maybe. So we've got a little bit higher ROI on some of these onslaughts. Let's just run the sim again, see what happens. It's always good to run it a couple times and see the variation. So we've got 6, 3s, 9, 11. Same proportion of 4-mans to onslaughts. And our highest ROI lineup is still the Rangers. And it's right about the same ROI. So, to me, we got a higher ceiling ROI with the onslaughts using SaberSim stuff and using Sheets' stuff. And to my mind, I mean, this is making a case, at least on tonight's slate, for onslaughts. And that onslaughts still get you the higher ROI, at least in the small field stuff. So let's go to D Pope's question here. Pull it up. Thanks. Yep. Thanks for watching. So let's go to D Pope's and let's just reset everything again. And we will run this with Sheets of stuff, assuming a 20-man. So I'm going to use, the flagship ownership that Sheets has should be pretty good for the 20 max too. So I'm going to upload Sheets' ownership. And use that instead of SaberSim. Call it Sheets 2. Load it in here, Sheets 2. I have Sheets here, I have Sheets here. Make sure no constraints, apply. And let's run 5,000 lineups. We want some more So we initially used these sliders. This is about 1,000 to 10,000 field. 20 max, good. Sliders are about the same. And now let's run a simulation. Let's see how it looks. Max entries. So the 20 max, I assume you're talking about the hip check depope. If I'm not, correct me. And if I don't see your chat, I apologize. I am new to using Restream. Let's add a sim for this. Whether you're talking the hip check or a different 20 max, I think this is going to get you there. All right. Now, let's uncheck the small field sim and just run the hip check. Let's see what our top 20 lineups look like using Sheets as projections and hip check. Look at all that Pasternak. I mean, that to me, that is scary. Getting almost 100% of a guy in NHL. But it is a 3-game slate. And we talked about this in Discord with Lopez, right? And then on one hand, do you want 78, 80, 90% of a guy? On the other hand, how much of a guy can you take on such a small slate? And of course, it's all dependent on ownership and projection and everything. Let's see what our stack exposure looks like. Still a lot of these onslaughts. Out of 20 lineups, we've got almost half onslaughts. 1 5-man, 3 6-mans, 5 5-2s. So that's 9. 11 4-mans, and you get some of the 3s. To me, I don't care what SaberSim has to say. I just don't quite understand the 3-3 and the 3-3-2. And I know we're giving a little bit more favorability to the 3-mans, but I'm just going to X those. Our team stacks a lot of Boston. A lot of Boston. Let's see what our top ROIs look like. Huge ROIs. Huge, huge, huge ROIs. Using Sheets of stuff. And that's why you're getting to all this Boston. So, on one hand, we want to do what it says, but we have to consider our risk. And the other thing we have to consider is that the Sims are wrong. Or not wrong, but they're just not accurately projecting ownership, and that these inflated ROIs, I mean, they're never realistic. And when we look after the slate, we're not going to have, if we have a 20% ROI, we're happy. If we have a 480, there's something, in how it's projecting ownership that's not wrong, but it's perfect, right? And we're simulating it in a perfect world as if we know exactly what will happen, but we don't. So, I want to get away from having nearly 100% Boston. So I'm going to put in some uniques and see what happens. So I put in 3-min uniques. Get down to the 34th lineup. It's not enough. 4-min uniques. No, it's looking a little bit different. Now we've got a little bit of everyone. Our stack exposure, we take out these 3-mans. Now we're going to get some variation. And needless to say, we should start getting more 4-mans as we demand more uniques, because the combos are going to clump in those onslaughts, I would think. And the 4-mans are going to let you do different things. So now we've got 14% buzz. I mean, I'm still inclined to think this is a little bit too much. I don't want to necessarily force it with uniques. Let's see how much, we go down in ROI. Not much. We still get these inflated ROIs. We're only down to our 80th lineup. So I'm inclined to play a lot of uniques and get a good range of diversity here. We're not giving up really much in ROI. Now, I mean, to me, this is more tolerable. We've got half Boston, half Edmonton, not half, 40%. And then you get a lot of other stuff. So you get a lot of other outs, which to me, it just feels a lot better. I'm going to take out these 3-mans. And deep hope that, I mean, that's how I would run my 20 max, using Sheets as projections and SaberSim. And I'd get a lot of diversity, get a lot of outs. So I'm happy to play Boston, who it thinks is the best team. Yeah, no Rangers, right? So that's interesting, right? No Rangers. So if we run like the small field stuff, those super high projected teams like Rangers and Edmonton, one way or the other, you get to them, depending on which set you use. And then, in the bigger field stuff, forget the Rangers, right? I mean, I don't think it's that strange, right? You need to beat a lot of people. So it's saying get leverage, get this lower owned stuff, get you the 2.6 total Boston, 30% Chicago. It makes sense. I mean, let's see. We look at goalies. 3 goalies, and they're all the 3 underdogs. Let's see what our exposure looks like. Half to Dobes, the cheapest goalie. Not the biggest underdog, but an underdog nonetheless. A lot of Boston with Korpisalo. 1 Soderblom. Yeah, I mean, Soderblom's the cheapest goalie. So I don't know. I mean, I'm first thought, I have the same thought as you, like strange, but then again, maybe it's not strange, Deep Hope. Maybe that's exactly what we should expect. That how big is the hip check? Like when we need to beat 4. Okay, so in the small field stuff, we're only trying to beat 67 people, and so the ownership matters, but to what extent? We can still play a pretty high projected line. Now, in the hip check, we need to beat 4,700 people. And so our SaberSim really wants to get you different, right? Say, look, people are going to be playing the Rangers. People are going to be playing Edmonton. Maybe they're going to play the Kings. These are the favorites. They're probably going to do the best. But what happens when they don't? I mean, what happens when Boston does the best, when Chicago does the best, and, you're sitting trying to only beat 700 people out of those 4,700, as opposed to trying to beat 2,000, 3,000. So, it's DFS, it's leverage. And I do think it makes sense when we put our mind to it a little. So that is how I would build for the 20 max. You saw my process for the single entry stuff. I'll try and integrate some more things, and we'll look going forward and see what kind of lineup SaberSim gives us with their updates to the model. And that's it. Remember to like and subscribe. Come and join us at TrueDFS. You can get access to all these tools. You can get access to the premium content, the premium Discord. And we're excited to see you guys in there and have you guys alongside for more great content. And good luck on tonight's slate, whatever contest you're playing.